Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of How to Get Your First Board Seat, Candid Coffee. I'm your host, Cameron Clark. And today I have none other than Vic Akosile joining me. Obviously, you and I have been connected for a little while now, and I've been following your journey online, both in the Veblen community and on LinkedIn. But when I read your intake form, one phrase jumped out to me right away. You said board seats came from solving problems before you were asked. And that, from all my conversations that I've had, both on the podcast and otherwise, it feels like a very different way of becoming a board member or how people think about boards. When did you realize that simply being helpful turned into board level influence?
Yeah, great question. And I think I was like, did I actually write that? And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds like something I would say. But I think that phrase is important because it's been symbolic of how I see opportunities unfold for myself,
Okay.
right? And I put that there for board roles because when I would talk to companies, originally there is a inclination to try to show how much you know, show
Mm-hmm.
how smart you are. And the reality is they've been running their business longer than you've been interested in being a board member of their business. So they just have context, the knowledge, know-how about how to run and what truly the problems are that you don't have. So I saw my role as coming in, listening, providing perspective, and saying, hey, I actually know how to solve this problem, or this is how I would go about solving this problem. Tell me what you've done. I can tell you what I know, or I can introduce you to people who can help you solve it. All of a sudden, the value is created, not improving myself, but in understanding where they are, where they've been, and trying to connect that to how I can help them or bring in others more resources to help them solve their problems. So I think that's been my journey so far there.
Nice. So you start from a collaborative aspect and you notice a problem, right, that you can probably relate to. And you say, hey, I've done things this way. I'm not trying to push my solution on you because there are nuances there. How are you approaching it? And then the relationship evolves from there, and it can go in a myriad of different paths. All the while, you have a guiding hand on how the problem gets solved.
I
Um,
I love the way that you put that much more nicely, much more succinctly, but in essence, yes.
Very cool. Very cool. So what kinds of problems were founders calling you about?
Yeah. So less calling and just more through the conversation and observation, right? So
Hmm.
one of the boards that I sat on, they had a problem of expanding from just working with startups to one it's a PR company. It's based out
Hmm.
of Singapore. And they were at this inflection point where they've been doing things almost a mom and pop-ish, but it's a growing like business. But now they want to scale, and that could be one of two things: solving the same problem for a different customer, or a different problem for the same customer, right?
Right, right.
And their challenge was that, especially during that time, the startup flow of free money was dwindling down, right? So they realized, hey, this is a risk in my business. I know how to talk to these people, but where do I find, how do I position myself? How do I de-risk myself to now talk to a different audience, and what problems can you solve for them? So that was a situation where we was able to help them to take what they're currently doing and just apply it to a different audience, apply it to a different positioning, and implement a go-to-market strategy for them. Another board that I sit on, the challenge is quite similar. It's really about scale, right? If you've been doing something at a 5 million revenue standpoint, how do you do it at a 50 million revenue standpoint and not break? And I think it was a point where things were breaking. And there, a lot of it is really perspective, providing resources and really showing them that there's a better way. They've been running again like their business for years, so sometimes you don't get to see how things are done elsewhere, and I think that's a piece of value that you can provide as a board member.
Nice. So you helped one company go from where they were to where they wanted to be. Essentially, I don't know if it was the same company, if you helping them 10x their business, essentially, or was that the second one?
That was the second one.
Okay.
They had a lot of, let's call it, they did not have enough systems to support their growth. The systems were people who were the system, and that works as long as A, like the people are there, and two, no one goes on a PTO or it takes a break. So you can't scale like a business like that. So what other solutions can we provide? What other targeted mechanisms, what other investments can we put in so that we can have systems? So that was that one. Yep.
Okay, got it. You help them create organic or inorganic growth, but you said, I see your problem. I see that you're stuck. I see where you want to go. But before we can start this journey, we need a foundation, and your foundation has to be systematic. Right. And so you help them get those systems in place in order to explore that organic or inorganic growth. Very cool.
Yeah.
And then the other one.
That, sorry. That actually made me to think of something that a lot of times is not so much, again, going back to my earlier point, your knowledge, your know-how. It's that there's somebody else even thinking about growing their business. Right? If you're the CEO, if you are the founder, right, the buck stops with you, right? Yeah. So if you have to make payroll, then you're going to make payroll. It needs to come from somewhere, right? The buck stops with you. So nobody else, rarely, especially at certain sizes and levels, is thinking about growth, legacy, transition. More of the strategic business elements besides them. So that in itself is valuable. That wow, somebody else who's thinking about growing my business in the same way that I am, not just trying to do enough to justify their paycheck, right? So that in itself is valuable.
So good point, right? So not many people think about this, but being the founder or CEO of a small and medium-sized business, and these are small and medium-sized businesses we're talking about, right? It's very lonely, right? Everything is on you. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? So coming in as a board member and saying, I'm not trying to take anything from you, but I'm trying to share this burden with you, and to some extent, right? Because you're not going to be tactical in any form, but I'm going to help you think about where your business is now and where you need to go. Because in most cases, if you're not growing, you're dying. But that's not all cases. It's very valuable. Since you have, as a CEO, you gain a friend or two or three or seven, depending on how big your advisory board is, and that can be very valuable, especially if someone is approaching it the way you do in a collaborative effort. So very cool. So it's two boards that you sit on, right?
Yes. Now it's two. It was more, but I found that these two are the places where I can add the most value.
All right. We'll probably get into that a little bit later. I mean, there's always something to be said about knowing your bandwidth and knowing where you get your energy from and where you can add value. But from what I know, the companies whose boards you sit on are very different.
Yes.
Can you walk me through how each of those relationships form?
Yeah, sure. So obviously through the Veblen program, I actually, for one of them, it was not directly through the Veblen program, but somebody in the development program, who knew the work that I do, actually invited me to be on this board. And then the other one there was directly through the program. And how the relationships have been growing and how they've developed is really interesting. One, I'll share a bit about what each one does. So one is a ABA therapy organization that helps children who may be dealing with autism or learning challenges or difficulties get the care that they need. Very, very meaningful work. And this is the one that I was saying is trying to scale from obviously where they are to a much larger level. And then, yes, to your point, the other one is very different. It is a high ritzy glitzy PR firm in Singapore that really helped a lot of startups to grow and build their founder story, and now expanding on that into different audiences, lack of a better term, into marketing and a few other areas. So a lot of the relationships come by, again, being in those meetings and putting on an air of what are they saying? What are they not saying? And what is really being said? It's almost you have to think of levels, like you have to listen and to say, okay, interesting. Well, they didn't talk about that, and they're really focused on this. And then asking the probing questions of, hey, so what does this really feel like? Like, what are you actually trying to achieve, right? So I think there's layers, but it shows that A, you're listening, B, thoughtful, and then C, by the time you reply, it's an informed reply, right? It is a perspective that they now know because you have shown them that you understand where they are today, right? And you bring your perspective of either, hey, you know what? You can't do this with just people like alone. Like you need to start investing in systems. There's a trust or a level of confidence that comes from, you know what, this person just sat here and listened to me ramble for like 45 minutes. I can take my 10 to 15 minutes to figure out what to do next, right? So, but yes, in short, very different, but that's how I approach those relationships.
Interesting. I've never heard anyone frame the way they listen in the way that you did. You said obviously listening, then you parse it through three filters. What are they saying? What are they not saying? And I've heard that before. And then, but the third one was new to me. What do they actually mean?
What do they actually mean? Yes, because language is an imperfect tool that we use to communicate meaning, right? So sometimes, and we see this in life, we say things, but then we're like, okay, that's not what I meant, right? So sometimes you have to take a step back, analyze, and ask questions to really get at, well, what do you really mean, right? Yeah, that's how I do try to listen and ask myself, do I know those three levels?
Yeah. So are both of the companies whose boards you sit on, are they first instances of those boards?
Good question. Yes, the ABA therapy company may have had advisors, but this is the first time they've had a group to truly be a consistent advisory board. But in short, yes, this is their first time having a board like this.
Okay. So I'm sure there's a lot of learning going on both sides. Let's talk about the founder side, or the leadership team side. What misconceptions might they have had about an advisory board?
Misconceptions. Interesting. I don't think there was, well, for me, in my experience, because we had really good conversations before we formed the board that established norms and the dynamics, I don't think there were misconceptions. But I think there are interesting patterns that some founders or CEOs or leaders may exhibit. One is the, hey, you're now my boss kind of exhibit, right? Where for them, it sounds comical, but it's helpful, right? They don't have anybody else they're accountable to but themselves. And sometimes it's easy to make excuses for yourselves, but if you know somebody else is expecting these financial reports by the board meeting, before the board meeting, so they can do a pre-read, well, all of a sudden accountability is quite high, right? So I think that scenario of like of my new boss is a pattern there. I think the other pattern that I'm seeing is at times they are looking towards the advisory board to make the choice, right? And the advisory board, as it stands, is advisory. Now, sometimes I have really strong opinions about what the choice is, right? You should listen to me. But at the end of the day, they need to own that choice. So I think, and maybe this is a misconception that they will help you choose. No, the choice stays with the business owner, right?
Right.
Advisory board can be here today, and by next year, it's either a different group of people or, it may have evolved, but choice stays with the business owner. So, but even that in itself is empowering them to say, actually, the way you change your business is through your decision. So we need to make a decision about this now. Either you agree with me or you agree with somebody else, or you have your own perspective. The choice is the power, not just getting lots of perspectives and advice, right? It's the choice that actually happens. Not quite misconceptions, but I do see some patterns that do occur.
Okay. Interesting. I like that answer. What I keyed in on though is that many aspiring entrepreneurs get into entrepreneurship because they want to be their own boss, right? And which is not a bad thing, but when you're in the thick of it, you actually have a business going on. I mean, even before you get the business off the ground and you're doing all the prep work, if you're only accountable to yourself, it can, I guess, maybe not motivate you or slow you down. So accountability is a powerful tool.
Yes.
No matter where you are. So let's go to the flip side though. For the boards, any misconceptions or patterns that you notice?
Yeah. Let me talk about patterns, because now I've been on a few. I do tend to see patterns, and I think I have some patterns and some best practices. So the most effective boards, in my opinion, are the boards that help a leader, a founder, or CEO make a critical decision now, or make important decisions. Now, if you had a group of 3 to 4 people and a group of 5 to 10 people, and you said, hey, I need you all to make an important choice, which one of those groups do you think will make the choice faster? Right?
The group of 5, obviously.
A group of 3 to 5, right? So I've been on boards where there are because of either let's call it the profile, the presence, the credibility, it feels like almost like a stock board, right? Like you're putting together the all-star of a starting lineup for a baseball team. But just because you have more people at the table doesn't mean you have progress. What creates progress is what I said earlier, speed and clarity of choice. So I think that is something, if you are a advisor, understand, or if you are putting together like a board, understand that the numbers impact the quality of the board greatly. Okay, so that's one. 2 is there's only but so much time that you do have with your founder, that you do have with your executive. So you need to make the most out of that time, right? So spending time, valuable time, there to ask questions that could have been answered before or could have been gleaned somewhere else actually slows things down, right? You want to be able to build rapport, momentum quickly, but then have them get to the choice that they're trying to make, the problem that they're trying to solve. And I think thirdly, there is a tendency at times to give advice, and that advice can turn into homework, but that homework may also pull them away from the critical operations of running their business, right? So you are in a very privileged position. So understand that your power, or your words have power.
Right.
So be clear that if this is something that you're interested in versus something that they should do. For example, was on a board, and one of the members said, I would love to see some data on what you all are doing in your advertising campaigns or marketing. Now that founder is like, well, my board needs to see this, and spends a lot of time trying to fix it and get it right, because perhaps this is the first time that they're doing this. For that board member, it was a curiosity, but for that executive, it is work that needs to be done, that they're assigning it to people, like they're checking. So be mindful of what you're asking and be mindful of what you're saying, because a lot of times that translates into work and you're pulling away people from the business that's actually running. So those are my three. That's
okay. Wow. All right. So there's a lot to unpack there. I'll try to pull out some nuggets.
Okay.
But you mentioned speed, clarity, and confidence is what founders are really looking for in a board member, or really what they're looking for, not necessarily a board member, right? And it's your job as a board member to bring that. And so going fast forwarding to the last part of what you just said, and when you're speaking to your founder or your executive team, just like as a board member, you're listening to what they say, what they didn't say, what they actually mean. The founder actually has to do that as well.
Correct.
But you can't expect that of the founder, right? You have to be very clear, direct, targeted with your words, because they could send an entire business off doing something that really wasn't value added, or maybe it was value added, but it wasn't worth the time that they spent on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it is a very privileged position that you're in as a board member. So I like the way you put that. So I guess what should aspiring board members misunderstand just as badly?
Ask that question again, because it's a really cool question.
Thank you. What do or should aspiring board members misunderstand just as badly?
What should they misunderstand? Okay. Here is what my thought on that answer. And it's a little bit of around the things I've shared earlier, but I'll to take it from a slightly different angle, right? Going back to being able to help them solve problems and the clarity and the speed of a decision. Your job there is not to help them to run the business, right? That's not your job. And I think something that board members can misunderstand is, hey, I need to be that involved in it, right? On the other side, I've seen it to the other extreme, where you're there to help solve problems, but your contributions don't advance a decision or provide clarity to solving a problem. And you're almost too standoffish or too person in the tower-ish, so you can't come down to meet them where they are, right? So I think that's another thing too, that people see a board as, whoa, these are people sitting at a high table, making
Council.
choices. Exactly, this high castle here. But the problem with the high castle mindset is that you don't really have an understanding of what's going down on the ground, right? So every often you need to come off your high castle and really have an understanding. And don't be afraid to get your hands dirty like a bit, right? If you can solve a problem, that is the value, right? If you can send an email to somebody that will accelerate a critical decision or a business introduction, send the email. You could have like the founder do it, but you can do it too. And now that's one thing that they don't have to do, but they still feel the same connection, the same power. In fact, your impact is felt even more. So I think for such a cool question, those are the two things like I have there for that.
Thank you. Thank you. So if I could synthesize it succinctly, I would say, being a board member is a very privileged and prestige position, but don't forget what it's like to be a worker bee. Right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. If you can do something, right, either through your own efforts, your actions, your connections, your know-how, that's value, right? And again, the other side of that equation is don't become an operator as well, right? Because now you're just handicapping them by being the person to solve like the problem. But if you were to change or leave or like call, well, now the problem is still there, right? So absolutely.
Don't try to be a cook in someone else's kitchen. Doesn't work.
Yeah, oh, I love that. I love that. Absolutely. Yes.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and put the spotlight on you and what you do, because you yourself are a founder. You describe yourself as an AI workforce architect. Tell us a little bit about what that means and how it plays in the boardroom. Because again, I'm going back to you're sitting on two boards and they're very different organizations. I want to see how your value shows up in both settings.
Yeah. So I'll share like a little bit about my background, AI, and how I translate that to boards. For a long time, it was really challenging for me to actually do. So my background is actually in HR technology and management consulting, right? So I've been a consultant, I've been an HR professional, and my main thing was, and actually like a leadership coach, and my main thing was using technology to advance business forward, or using my people skills in HR and leadership like development to advance things forward. And I've been in positions often where I am the de facto expert on technology, innovation, and these kinds of things, where I over time stopped becoming the de facto expert and more of a traditional expert in these things. So what I do now is I work with a lot of executives in HR and just in corporate management as a whole to help them, one, find the opportunities that AI can provide, two, implement that for their workforce, and then three, really, this is like the core and main thing, build a strategy and roadmap that will make sure that they do the first two things. So that's a lot of what I do. And I think how that's played out is that I bring so it's interesting. I bring a technological perspective into problem solving, but I always try to balance that with not everything is a technology problem.
You're kidding me. No.
Yeah. And there's a tendency, and as somebody who I feel like has made a lot of mistakes with technology, there's a tendency to see, let's go back to the one of the companies that I'm advising, to see your process problem as just the technology problem. If you just get the right systems, everything will be better. Sure. But what if the people you have don't have the expertise, the talent, or they don't even see a problem? They're fine with how things are going right now. Well, now you have a leadership development problem. Now you have a coaching problem. Now you have a talent problem. I think I've been, at first, stepping into these roles, I said, well, I'm more of like an HR guy, like I know about technology. I'm not sure how I can help somebody to manage and to grow their business. But I've been surprised how much of it is really making sure that the strategy is sound, that you know why you're doing it, reviewing the options. And a lot of times those options is either you need technology, like you need people, like you need a better process, like which one of the three. And then really bringing in my experience of working in the corporate world to say, well, here is how like we do it here. That's a working model, but let's try to scale it down or scale it differently for you, right? So that's how it all connects. It took me a while to, see where my background and experience can really add value. But now I see it very clearly, and I'm more confident in how I approach things.
Okay, nice. I want to pick up where you just left off. You said you had a hard time seeing where your value, or what maybe even what your value was, and how you fit that into other people's problem sets and needs. What was that process like for you? How did you go about uncovering that?
Yeah. I think it goes back to taking the time to understand before trying to prove that you know something. I think it's really easy, especially when you're in these boardrooms, to want to show that you know what you're talking about. But I'm a really practical person. I think that's the best way to say it. When you're walking in, you don't know what you're talking about. You've never ran this business before. You are walking in with fresh eyes, and for the first kind of few months there, your goal is to just wrap your head around the problem, listen at those three levels, and ask clarifying questions. What I found is that sometimes the clarifying questions that I have, that I think I need to know, are actually questions the founder or the executives need to get clarity on, right? So I would ask, well, what is your strategy, or what is your, ICP that you're trying to target, so that I have a better understanding. And sometimes I'm surprised where they're like, honestly, we're still trying to figure that out. But that's a good question, because here's what I think it is, right? Okay, now I know what they know, but what they don't know. And I'm not assuming that there's a knowledge there, like, or not. So I think through that, I started to see patterns, my own business experience, my corporate experience, and through the various boards I'm on. And the pattern typically evolves around we grow, and then we get stuck. And now we plateaued and we don't know what to do. Now we have to unlearn a whole bunch of things and relearn new things. And then we grow, something gets stuck. We have to unlearn and relearn, right? So in my, mind now, I kind of have a mental motto. Okay, have they grown? They're grown. Looks like they're stuck. Okay, if they're stuck, is it people, process, technology? Are they trying to unlearn things, right? But those are patterns you get by synthesizing and learning. And it's not necessarily my HR background that comes to the forefront, or my technology background always comes to the forefront. But those are things that I use to be able to offer solutions and perspective. So, yep.
Nice. And then, so you emphasize that board journeys are non-linear, and obviously for you, they've been built through conversations, and I suspect that's more so the rule than the anomaly, as in my world, is what I would think of. So that's for those who are listening, like, what should they focus on in the next 30 days? And I know that's a broad question, because it all depends on where everyone is in their individual journey. But if you could, like, how would you break that down for people?
Yeah. I think the greater clarity you have on yourself, the greater you show up for people. And what do I mean by that? For the next 30 days, if you are unclear of the problems that you feel like you are uniquely equipped to help to solve, or to explore, or to provide perspective on, that is what you should focus on. Going like to people and to say, hey, I know you have a business. What I'm doing is starting to talk with people because I am uniquely equipped to solve the problem around, I don't know, process automation. Okay. I would love to have a conversation with you on any challenges that you may have there, or your perspective on it as a whole. All of a sudden, doors start to open up, because one, you're not trying to pitch like yourself. Two, you're being very transparent and vulnerable about this is where I am, this is what I'm trying to do. And three, that's amazing for like the founder that you can help to solve this specific problem. They can now share and unburden themselves. You gain some clarity on what a real business is going through. But then that conversation starts a thread, right? Right. It starts by you understanding them. They feel like the perspective you give them, right, has more context, has more resonance, right? So I think if there's anybody out there who's saying, hey, I'm on day zero, not even day one, day zero, what do? I think clarity of self, clarity on what you can provide is where to start. And if you don't know, try something out, try something out, see if it fits, talk to people. If it's not resonating, perfect. You know what doesn't work. So, something else.
Okay, so get clarity on who you are, what value add you can provide, and stick with that. Don't try to be a jack of all trades. Be able to communicate that clearly, and if the founder or whomever you're speaking with resonates with that, great for you. It's a win. More often than not, it's not going to resonate. But you go on to the next, right? And you connect with that founder. I'm going back to what you said earlier in our chat. You connect, you understand who they are, what problems they're facing, and how they're trying to go about solving it. And maybe there's a nugget in there for you to latch on to, and hey, and I do this, or someone that can help them out. Let's say you get clarity on who you are and what value you provide, but you're stuck on how to approach founders, right? So I went back a little step. I went back to the middle. What do you do?
You're stuck on how to approach founders, but you have some clarity about what you could do. I think what you lack is not clarity on what you provide. What you lack is the reps to have the conversation, right? There is a confidence gap at that point that you have. And oddly enough, right, the only way to close a confidence gap is through action. Action provides proof points for yourself, provides past experience for yourself. That's all confidence is, your belief in your ability to actually do something. And it's much easier to believe you can do something when you've tried it, you've put yourself out there, you've had those conversations, and now the threshold of action becomes much lower. The first time you do have that conversation, the threshold of action feels so high because it's new. Now, for me, I mean, that's been my experience. Now I feel extremely confident, whatever size company, to hop into a conversation with an executive, the founder, and to fully know that I will see something that they don't, or I can engage in a way and provide perspective that they just don't have, because I am my own unique perspective, right? So I think, not sure if that answers your question, but if somebody came to me with that, I'll just say, look, man, like, you just need more reps.
No, you 100% answered my question. You have to have a bias towards action. And for a lot of people, even that might be frightening. But like you said, the only way to get over it is to actually do it. First time you're going to do it, it's probably going to be terrifying. You're probably going to trip over your words and forget what you're trying to say. But hey, you put yourself out there. That meeting probably won't go very well. But next time you do it, you'll be less nervous, right? Yeah. So at this point, for you, having these conversations is like drinking water or breathing air, right? Because this is what you do, because you've had so many reps. Right?
I mean, that's very flattering. I mean, like, I still, have my moments of, okay, like, what's going on there? But again, I think I have enough proof points to know that I've been in the same situation before, and I can rely on myself and trust myself, like, really to be present, to be there. And at the very least, if I don't know what I'm talking about, sometimes I'm very transparent and say, I am not the best person for you to talk to because I don't know anything about this. But let me tell you what I know, right? And then maybe there's a value in there, but that is the level where I'm at now, where I feel really comfortable to walk into any room and know that I do have value. And if not, I will let them know to say that, hey, there's somebody else who can probably answer this for you. That is my value to exactly with them.
So I appreciate that vulnerability and honesty in that answer. So what I've gathered throughout our conversation today is that you don't chase the seat, right? You lead with value and connection and collaboration. Maybe things will work out, maybe they won't. Maybe you'll be the person that helps them get to the person that they need to talk to, but you don't chase the seat. So why is chasing the seat a trap?
Oh, wow. Wow. That is a really good question. Why is chasing a seat a trap? No one needs a board. They value what the board brings, but what they really want is the value that a board brings, right? You chasing a seat doesn't do anything. In fact, even if you were trying to chase it for, aspirational growth means either in your career or your business, what you really want is people to come to you, right? And that's why you share freely, you lead with value, because so few people actually do. So few people want you to say, well, if you can just put me here, right, then you'll see. Which it's like we're laughing, but we know that's true, right? Oh, okay,
Right.
just wait. My good stuff is coming. I was like, okay. So that's why you don't chase after it. You lead with value. One, even from a dynamic standpoint, personally, this positions you as an authority that they're looking towards. If I have to convince you that, I offer value and that you should put me on your board, you're doing me a favor.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You're doing me like
yeah.
where you really want it to be a mutual exchange, or if you do have that much value, it don't the other way. So chasing a board seat just for a board seat's sake, I think is a losing game because nobody really wins. But if you can lead with value, if you can, and when I say value, right, because that's a very kind of elusive word. So let me break that down. If you can lead with, here is how I solve problems, or here's how I can help you solve a problem, or here is how I can help you make the change that you want to make, right? Either one of those two buckets. The board seat is just a mechanism to get your brain trust into the room, right?
Right.
That is one of many mechanisms. I've talked to companies where, like we're sharing, like we're talking, and I said, I don't really want to be on your board, but this sounds like a project that I know that I can help you consult with now. That is a way to get my brain trust into the room, right? So that's why I said, don't chase after the board seat, lead with the value, lead with the problems like that you solve, because I don't think it ends well for both parties, and the dynamic is just so off.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. Because my next question was going to be, what does it signal to founders if you do chase a board seat? And I think you kind of answered it. It's that the dynamic is going to be off. It's probably going to be a tough working situation. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, and again, they feel like they're doing you a favor, right?
Yeah.
Which, if you are chasing a board seat, then they are, then they are. It should feel like, wow, they're on my board, but I feel so lucky that I have their brain, their perspective, their network, in my business, right? So that's why exactly why you want to lead with value.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that.
Mhm.
So Vic, is there
Mhm.
anything you want to share that we haven't touched on?
Sorry. Uh, is there anything that I would love to share? I think the world around us is changing, right? Not just through time, but I think all of us know we are going through a uh, what I like to call the fourth digital wave right here with AI.
Mhm.
And the reason why I'm excited is because the cool things that I look into naturally, that I tinker with and play with, are
Mhm.
no longer toys, right? These are ways that people can transform their operation, transform their business, transform their strategy. So that is just one element. Now, if you take that and extrapolate it for any person, there is a perspective, expertise that you have that can ultimately help to change the trajectory of a business. So that's why I said, if you're on, either you're on day zero or day 1,000, getting clear on the problems that you can help a business leader solve, or the change that you can help them to achieve, is the best thing that you can do for yourself. For some people, that's in technology. For some people, that's in healthcare. For some
Mhm.
people, marketing. The great thing is that you get to decide what that is.
Now, those are great words of wisdom and advice. And let's say, you have someone who's listening to us, our conversation, and they hear you say, well, Vic says all I need is clarity. That's easy for him to say. He's successful, he's a tech leader, he's on multiple boards, and he can talk to anyone.
Mm.
I can't do that, but I want to contribute at a higher level. I want to be on a board at some point. What mindset shift do they need to make?
What mindset shift? I think you have to start looking at people as people and not their titles.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a shift that I know in my career I had early, especially me. Like, I grew up in a very traditional household. I'm a Nigerian. There was a lot of weight put on your position, or maybe something that you have achieved. But what that does a lot of times is that it creates a chasm, a gap for
Mm-hmm.
you to connect with the people, right? Because you see them as like, oh, you've done all of this, but you need to see them as, you are a person who happens to have done this, but you're still a person, right? So the
Right, right.
mindset shift of removing the titles, or or the gap that you feel like you have, and shifting that to say, well, let me connect, let me relate. And again, it will be harder at first if this is a challenge for you and you're still new to it. But the more you do it, the more you'll say, oh, yeah, everyone's just winging it. Everyone's just, doing the best they can. Right. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, they're still like a person. So I think that is one mind shift. Sorry, one mindset. And I think the second one that I will give is also to be transparent. I'm wondering, what do I mean by that? Don't purport yourself as more than what you are, or more than what you know.
Mm-hmm.
People understand that we are all on a journey, but
Mm-hmm.
you can let them know the journey that you are on. Right now, they are invested in your journey just as much, because they're on a different journey that they won't be privy to the experiences, the conversations, the learning, the knowledge that you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, like, there too, that your story is enough. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the big thing there. Your story is enough. There's no need to make it grandiose. And in fact, sometimes when you do, it's harder to connect with
yeah.
people. Those are the two mindsets there.
I like that. I like that. Your story is enough. Lead with that. Trust in that.
Mhm.
And thank you for sharing bringing it back to Nigerian roots. I told you we would get there.
Yeah,
Uh,
eventually.
but Vic, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. For me, it's morning. For you, it's the afternoon. But all the same, it's been a pleasure. I think we touched covered a lot of ground and shared a lot of insight. I'm looking forward to the feedback that we get on our conversation here. So again, Vic Akosile, everyone, thank you for joining. Until next time.